I never imagined that the house I'd poured my savings, sweat, and every ounce of my free time into could be turned into someone else's personal business without me even knowing. But that's exactly what happened when HOA Karen decided she was the self-appointed manager of my life and my lake house. It was a Wednesday morning, quiet except for the hum of my computer as I worked from my office 3 states away, sipping coffee and trying to shake off the grogginess. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from my old friend Dave, a guy who had spent countless weekends with me at the lake house, fishing from the dock, grilling under the stars, and playing cards in the living room we'd furnished with thrift store treasures and handmade pieces. The text read, "Bro, since when are you renting your lake place? Saw it on Lakeside Getaways. Looks exactly like yours." I frowned. That had to be a mistake. I clicked the link he sent, and my heart started pounding. There it was, my exact property. The same weathered green shutters I'd repainted myself last summer. The cedar deck I'd built board by board. The antique canoe tied to the dock that had belonged to my grandfather. Every single photo screamed my home. But the listing name stopped me cold. Karen Dalton, HOA president, serial busybody. The same woman who'd fined me for leaving my kayak rack unsightly and accused me of lowering property values by letting wildflowers grow along my fence line. The ad claimed exclusive private lake access and authentic rustic charm, as if she'd built the charm herself. I scrolled further and saw photos of my kitchen, my living room, my bedroom, the quilt my mom had sewn folded neatly at the end of my bed, all on display for strangers. Guests gushed in reviews about Karen's hospitality and her family home, even describing her meeting them at the dock with snacks and wine. One review said, "Karen told us her family has owned this house for generations. So, cozy!" My blood boiled. This wasn't an accident. This was calculated theft. She was making $250 a night off my place, and I had never agreed to a single thing. My fingers shook as I called Dave, and he confirmed it. She'd been running the listing for months. That's when I decided I wasn't going to just send a cease and desist letter. I wasn't going to make polite phone calls. I was going to catch her in the act. I opened the listing's booking calendar and saw she had guests arriving that weekend. Perfect. Without hesitation, I cleared my schedule, packed my truck, and hit the road. I imagined her face when I walked onto my own deck and asked her what she thought she was doing. My 6-hour drive was filled with planning exactly how to confront her, how to document everything, and how to make sure this blew up in her face, publicly and legally. She had no idea I was coming, and I was counting on that. If you love watching HOA tyrants get exactly what they deserve, make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a single wild story like this one. By the time my tires crunched over the gravel road leading to my lake house, the evening sun was spilling gold over the water, turning the scene into something that would have been peaceful, if my blood wasn't still simmering. I cut the engine just before the driveway and walked the last stretch on foot, wanting to take her completely by surprise. 3 unfamiliar cars sat in my driveway, their trunks open with coolers, suitcases, and inflatable paddle boards spilling out. Laughter and music drifted from the back deck, and the smell of grilled burgers hung in the air. I crept around the side of the house and saw them. 4 young adults lounging in deck chairs, beer bottles in hand, talking about how Karen really hooked us up with a family rate. My jaw clenched. I stepped forward. "Evening," I said, my voice calm but cold. They smiled at me, assuming I was another guest. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" one of them said. I nodded. "Yeah, beautiful night. To be on my property." They blinked. One girl laughed nervously. "Oh, are you Karen's brother or something?" I pulled out my phone and showed them my deed, my name clearly printed. "No, I'm the owner, and I've never met a single one of you." Their faces drained of color. They stammered about how they'd paid Karen $750 in cash for the weekend, that she'd told them the house was hers, and that she'd even greeted them that morning with a welcome basket. I recorded every word. Then, as if the universe was perfectly timing this, tires crunched in the driveway again. A silver SUV rolled in, and out stepped Karen, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying grocery bags like she was walking into her own kitchen. The moment she saw me, she froze. "Oh, I thought you weren't coming up this season," she chirped, her voice too high, her smile too tight. "I never said that," I said flatly. "And I sure as hell never told you you could rent out my place." The guests looked between us, realization dawning. Karen's voice wavered. "Well, I thought since it was sitting empty it would be a shame not to share it with people who could enjoy it." "The money goes to community improvements," I cut her off. "This isn't a community property. This is my property. You've been trespassing and profiting off my home without permission." The guests, clearly uncomfortable, started gathering their things. One muttered something about calling the cops. Karen's confident facade began to crumble. She tried to salvage it by leaning closer and whispering, "We could work something out. I can split the profits with you. No one has to know." That was it. The final nail. I stepped back, recording her offer on my phone. "Thanks for confirming this isn't your house," I said. Her face went pale. She tried to follow me inside, but I shut the door in her face. The rest of that night, I stayed in my house, locking the doors, watching from the window as she drove off in a hurry, leaving the guests to awkwardly pack up their cars. The evidence was stacking up, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The next morning, I was on the phone with my lawyer before my coffee even finished brewing. By mid-afternoon, we had a cease and desist letter ready, along with a formal demand for all rental profits she'd made, plus punitive damages. I texted the guests from the night before, and to my surprise, they were eager to help. They emailed me signed statements detailing their payments, Karen's claim of ownership, and her welcome speech about her family home. My lawyer advised me to dig deeper, so I started combing through social media. What I found made my jaw drop. There were tagged photos from my dock going back almost 3 years. Different groups, same setting, all crediting Karen's lakeside retreat. Reviews on vacation rental sites told the same story. She'd been pulling this scam for a long time, making tens of thousands under the table. When served with the legal notice, Karen's tone shifted from defensive to desperate. First, she denied everything. Then she claimed she thought I'd given her verbal permission because I wasn't using the place much. When that fell flat, she tried to guilt me, saying the money went to repainting the HOA clubhouse and benefited the whole community. My lawyer was unmoved. The HOA board, smelling trouble, quickly threw her under the bus, issuing a statement that they had no knowledge of her activities and that she'd acted entirely on her own. In court, it was a massacre. Between the signed statements, the screenshots of her listings, the guest reviews, and the video of her offering to split profits with me, the judge didn't just side with me. He slammed her with a judgment for full restitution, triple damages for willful misconduct, and legal fees. The total? $68,000. I'll never forget watching her face as the number was read aloud, her lips trembling as she tried to maintain some shred of dignity in front of the neighbors who had once admired her. Word spread fast. By the end of the week, she had resigned from her position as HOA president, citing personal matters. My lake house now has a reinforced gate, security cameras, and a big private property, no trespassing sign. I make it a point to visit every month, even if just for a day, to remind the neighborhood that I'm watching. And Karen? Last I heard, she was quietly trying to sell her own home, but in a small lakeside community, reputations stick. She's no longer the queen bee of the HOA, just the cautionary tale people whisper about at block parties. And me? I've got my property back, my peace restored, and one hell of a story that proves no matter how slick someone thinks they are, they'll never outsmart the person who actually owns the deed. You'd think that after losing $68,000 in court, being forced to resign from the HOA presidency, and being humiliated in front of the entire lakeside community, Karen would fade quietly into the background like a storm that had finally passed. But that's not who she was. The thing about people like Karen is that they can't survive without an audience, without control, without someone to boss around. So instead of disappearing, she doubled down in the most passive-aggressive way possible. I'd catch her car, creeping slowly past my driveway when I visited the lake house, like she was hoping to catch me violating some obscure HOA rule so she could document it. Neighbors told me she'd started holding little gossip sessions on her porch, complete with lemonade and folding chairs where she'd spin wild tales about me, claiming that I was money-hungry, that I'd set her up to make her look bad, even that I'd lied in court to get her removed. The best part? Every time she tried to spread a rumor, someone who'd been at the trial would shut her down instantly, reminding her that the evidence against her had been so overwhelming the judge barely needed an hour to decide. Her social circle began shrinking, and the few people who still entertained her nonsense did it more out of pity than loyalty. Meanwhile, I decided to lean into the role of the guy Karen couldn't beat. I hosted a massive 4th of July barbecue at my lake house, open invite to every neighbor except her, and made sure to serve it right on the dock she'd once used to greet her paying guests. People laughed, kids played in the water, fireworks lit up the night sky, and Karen stood at the edge of her yard like a bitter ghost, watching through the hedges. But here's the thing, my real revenge came later, in the form of the HOA's annual audit. You see, my lawyer had mentioned in passing that Karen's claim about using my house rental money for community improvements might have been more than just a lie. It could be financial misconduct if she'd been handling HOA funds in a similar way. That stuck in my head, so when the audit came around, I politely suggested to the board that maybe it was time to review all receipts and transactions from her presidency. I didn't think much of it, until 2 months later, when I got a call from a grinning board member who said, "You're not going to believe this." Turns out, Karen had been rounding up vendor invoices for years, skimming the difference, into a miscellaneous fund that didn't exist on paper. They found thousands unaccounted for. The board turned the findings over to the county, and suddenly Karen had more than just her reputation to worry about. She had investigators. She must have realized how bad it looked because she put her house on the market for way under value and vanished before anything formal could be filed. No forwarding address, no goodbye, just gone. In a way, it was anticlimactic, but also perfect. The woman who once thought she owned the neighborhood couldn't even show her face to say goodbye. Now my lake house is truly mine again. No prying eyes, no petty fines, no strangers renting my bedroom for the weekend. Sometimes when I'm sitting on the deck at sunset, beer in hand, I think about Karen and wonder if she's trying her little scam somewhere else. If she is, I almost feel sorry for the poor soul who crosses her path. Almost. Because if there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's that people like Karen always underestimate two things: how much proof the truth leaves behind, and how far someone will go to protect what's theirs.